national security strategy paper, warning of an increasingly aggressive China, quote, repeatedly acting in contradiction with our interests and values. Scholz, with a bit of a tightrope act, when earlier in the day he addressed the German Industry Association BDI in Berlin.
The G7 has no interest in impeding China's economic rise, and at the same time, we are looking closely to avoid dangerous economic dependencies.
Diane Wei Liang sitting in Stuttgart, which is the trickier visit, that of Prime Minister Li to Germany or Secretary of State Blinken to Beijing?
Oh, both, I believe, are quite tricky. And partly why it is tricky is because China and the West, even though have been engaging and communicating for the past 40 years, and ultimately both sides do not understand each other. There is a huge lack of trust and understanding. And therefore, in these relationships, and there are lots of testing water. And also, I want to echo what Ralph said earlier from Washington, that for Xi Jinping, as well as President Biden or Olaf Scholz, and every politician has a domestic audience. And so both sides have to deal with both the domestic political audience as well as international. And it is very tricky for Germany to walk a fine balance. However, in this case, Europe and US are not aligned 100% because, for example, for Germany has a huge trade relations with China, and there is a great deal of dependency. And to decouple that, unravel that relationship will take a long time. And that will also create political tension with China. And so Europe, particularly Germany, is in a difficult position because on one hand side is the United States and the ally of Germany. On the other side is their largest trading partner, which is China.
Andre Petri, is Germany in a difficult relationship with Germany? I'm asking the question because you have these huge multinationals, Volkswagen, I can name all the car companies, BASF, all the pharmaceutical companies. They're increasing their investment in China these days.
Yeah, and I mean, what was just said is an understatement. I mean, yes, the West is very fragmented, but Germany itself, I mean, you spoke about the national security strategy that was released, I think, on Thursday or Friday last week. This was driven by the foreign ministry, who is led by a Green foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, which is not completely aligned with the chancellor, who is from the SPD. And we saw that with the story of the port of Hamburg. So I think even within governments, you have very, very different. I mean, this national security strategy is actually much less on Russia than people would have thought, and much more on China than we could have thought. And then think about the disagreement between France and Germany on China. And then between industry, part of industry, especially the big industry that has today between 30 and 40% of their revenues and sometimes more of their profit coming from China. You mentioned a few of these companies who are exerting a lot of pressure. And maybe the current move, we can also think that part of the U.S. industry is also behind what is going on and in the sort of appeasement or conciliatory tone, because there's a lot of pragmatism going on. Then I think, again, this is tactics. On the long term, we hear the word permanently happening is the word de-risking, not decoupling, but de-risking. Is how do we decrease our dependency? Because currently the companies that you mentioned, they have no other choice than to actually double down in China because they have actually lost. Is
Germany more exposed to China than it was with Russia and its natural gas?
I could even expand it. I think currently the whole European strategy, and it might be very strong words, about the Green Deal is a strategy that is leading to much more dependency to China. Think about lithium, think about rare earth. I mean, basically our whole transition to electricity and to circular economy is based on products and materials who are refined or coming from China. Think about batteries. And we celebrate, rightly so, a lot of gigafactories. The French president was very eager to have Elon Musk a couple of days invest in France. Did not happen yet. But actually the share of Chinese battery makers is actually keep increasing as over 70%. So if we think we were dependent on Russia, we're actually becoming much more dependent on China. And this is a strategic dilemma for most of the policymakers.
Ralph Winnie, are Europe and the United States going to grow more, not less, dependent on China?
Well, I think in regards to the German Prime Minister, they would like communication strengthened between the U.S. and China. And the Germans are in a kind of a difficult position because they put out this blueprint that accused the Chinese of acting against German interests, putting international security under increasing pressure and disregarding human rights. But at the same time, Germany understands the necessity of getting Beijing's cooperation on fighting climate change and promoting economic opportunities. So it's kind of this difficult hurdle. And I think the U.S. and Europe certainly are aligned on the human rights issues involving China, but you see France and you see Germany kind of breaking away from the U.S. when it comes to the economic side, looking to secure competitive advantage in the Chinese market, despite the fact that China is experiencing economic slowdown because of sluggish exports, and domestic demand has been weighing heavily on China post-COVID economy. Yeah. So the Chinese certainly want to have that division between the U.S. and the United States, certainly economically, and to take that advantage and push the human rights issues to the back burner.
Ralph Winnie, there is a change of tone. We mentioned that strategy paper on the part of the Germans. Even Italy, one of the EU's most willing partners of China, has its limitations. The government stepping in over the weekend to prevent China's Sinochem from designating the chief executive tire maker Pirelli. This despite being a main shareholder with a 37% stake. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's government invoking national security concerns about the potential for misuse of Pirelli's chip technology. Pierre-Antoine Donnet, were you surprised that the Italian government was stepping in to basically curb China's power in investing in Italy?
Well, you see, this is just another example that shows that the situation is evolving also in the European Union. We just talked about the policy paper in Germany. We have this example in Italy. And the Chinese side is also very worried about that. And they, being pragmatic, they take that also as a new situation. When you see the global picture in the last few months, since this balloon was shot down, the US succeeded in forging more strong relationship with its allies, not only in Europe, but also in Asia, especially in Asia. So there is a sense of urgency in Beijing.
Did Italy do the right thing by
of course
stepping
they did. In? Well, as I see it, they had to do that.
Well,
yes, of course.
I mean, this is a tire maker. What's so
because they have the experience of the Chinese producing their own tires. The story has been done previously by Michelin, which is the #1 tire producer in the world. They invested a lot of money in China, and they discovered afterwards that the Chinese side is copying what they do, and that they're producing now tires much less expensive. And also the other thing is that taking over a company like Pirelli is also political. So Italy was one of the very few countries in the European Union to sign a contract for the Belt and Road Initiative, and they opened 2 ports to the Chinese. This decision also has been reversed. This is also another sign that the perception of China in the European Union is changing. And as you mentioned, now the policy is de-risking. It's not decoupling, but it's not far from that. And if you see what's happening also, you mentioned that too, foreign investments in China are leaving